Hi, I'm anxious to tell you the story about my mother, Iva Nolf, who was a nurse in World War I. And I think I better start at the beginning. The reason I'm doing this is because Madeline and I were talking about a program for World War I because it was 100 years since that we were celebrating this year. So, and she said, well, you have your mother's diary, you should be able to do something. So I said, all right, I'll try. Well, of course, first of all, Mother was born. And she was born December the 29th, 1891. And here is the only record of that until her father went before the notary public and swore that she was indeed born that day and that she had American parentage. And that was so that she could go to serve in the war. She grew up on a farm and she was very intelligent, so she was sent to a teacher preparatory school in North Washington, Pennsylvania. And from that, she taught school for several years, earning the money for her tuition for Allegheny General Hospital School of Nursing. And she graduated from that in 1914. Mother stayed there until, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. She stayed there until they enlisted, they volunteered to become a Red Cross hospital in France. So that, okay, there we have Mother. Now, the summer that I was working on this, I felt I got to the point where I thought, okay, where do I go from here? So at that time, my son-in-law, Will, brought in this newspaper, it was the Bangor Daily, and it was a news article on the first page, Rumors Plagued Maine at the Start of World War I. And no one could believe the sudden explosion of violence resulting from old animosities and tangled treaties. First, Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia. Then Germany backed Austria, and Russia marched to protect Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia and France, Russia's ally. German armies invaded Belgium and France, and Britain declared war on Germany. All this and more happened in a few days between late July and early August 1914. So that really shook everybody up. And the U.S. declared war on Germany. Well, that happened later, of course, in 1917. The Allegheny General Hospital of Pittsburgh, PA, volunteered their services to the U.S. government for any purpose that the Department of War would deem necessary. The offer was accepted, and the entire medical staff was requested to organize a Red Cross hospital. Well, this is the time when Mother's father had to go to before the notary public to swear that yes, she was born there, and yes, she was an American. Well, a nursing force was organized, and there were 20 nurses, and here they are. There are really 21 because there are 20 nurses and then one that is the directress of nursing. And here we have Mother down here where are you, Mother? There she is. This is Mother. I don't know where this picture was taken. It's a very formal photograph. As you can tell by the background, they are all in full uniform. They weren't always in full uniform. So this is a great picture. They have on their gloves, their scarves, their pins, they're all set to go. They received their orders and went by train to Ellis Island for assignments. Mother would work at the Harlem Hospital from October the 14th, 1917 until February the 1st, 1918, when she was put in charge of the operating room at Park Hospital. This is her certificate of identification from the War Department, and it's very interesting. and they were of the Expeditionary Forces, American Expeditionary Forces. I have a hard time with that word. On October 21st, 1918, she received her Red Cross orders to report to 120 Madison Avenue that evening. Well, she was the first one to arrive and the only one. It was a ward of 21 beds, and she was the first one to arrive. So the next day, she decided, well, I'll go back to Harlem Hospital and visit my friends there. So she did. And when she came back, there were 10 more nurses there, and the rest would come in every now and again. Well, her entries in the diary from that time till the 21st was going to church and walking and going to movies and that sort of thing. Then on March the 21st, the equipment arrived. And when it arrived, that meant they had to repack it and mark it, and it would go to Hoboken, New Jersey, to the Pier 54. And that's where they went, and this is a picture of Mother's passport. Not at all like the passports we have today. But that was wartime. On March 22nd, 1918, they went out for the day, and when they returned, their trunks were gone, so they knew they were going. Their orders were received, and she said no one was there to kiss her goodbye. This is a picture of Mother's, see, I always pass those around. Mother's diary entry on March the 4th. I'm sorry. This AM to church around the corner to Seville for breakfast. 9:30 left 120 Madison in groups of 2 or 3 to Pier 54. On board the Mauretania, she would room with our Perrine, and she would eat with Marge. It's very, very nice. And of course it was nice. It was a top of the line. It was the Mauretania. It was the top of the Canard line. And this is the picture of the ship before they got on it. And you can see it's quite large, and you can understand that the ship not only had, but they had to have a crew, and they had to feed that crew. So there was quite a lot going on here, as you can well imagine, because this is a picture of the ship when the group got on. It's all in camouflage, as you can tell. So on March the 26th, they are on board, and Mother writes, there are 5,000 troops on this ship, besides hospital corpsmen, officers, nurses. Quite a shipload. We are all wearing our life preservers all the time, and trying to keep from feeling sick. On deck all the time. I'm there now. This is the first troop ship not to be convoyed over, and we will be met by a British convoy at the war zone. Alone now. They were counting on the camouflage and the rough seas that the submarines wouldn't be able to attack them. So that was her entries, and most of her entries in her diary were she wasn't feeling too well. On board the ship, Mother was seasick most of the time due to the rough sea. She wore her life jacket all the time while sleeping, dining, and sitting on the deck. The conditions were extremely crowded for the enlisted men who had to sleep in hammocks. One enlisted man died during the trip and was buried at sea. And another thing, ships like this have lifeboat drills, if any of you have ever been on a cruise. And it sounds, and you grab your life preserver and you run to wherever you're supposed to go, whatever lifeboat that you're assigned to. And these men were in hammocks, and it was quite a thing to get everybody lined up for the lifeboat drill. But everything worked out fine, and on Good Friday they sighted a battleship called North Dakota, and also a freighter. So they were starting to see other ships. On March the 29th, 1 year ago, the U.S. entered the war, she had in her diary. Well, now they are off England. March the 30th, sick again, I am a poor sailor, expecting the convoy tonight and will dock on Sunday. On the 31st, she got up early, out on the deck to see the sunrise, and there was a destroyer and 2 more on the horizon. They kept with them all day, and last night we slept fully dressed, and will do so tonight. Tomorrow we expect to be in Liverpool, England, and be on solid ground, and will I ever be glad. And especially now that they were being convoyed. On April the 1st, not one subsided, but 3 days ago 2 ships were torpedoed, not sunk, or anyone lost. Now they're coming into England, and you think, well, they're coming into England. Well, they'll come up, they came in up here in the northern part, so they had this trip all the way through England down to Portsmouth, where they were to get the ship to go to France. Okay, so they were on a train. They traveled first class, and Mother talked about this the nice area that they were going through, and everybody was happy. On April the 5th, Southampton left the hotel at 2:45, marched to the docks to board a hospital ship called the Guildford Castle, a ship used in the Med for the wounded, and it would carry 500 troops. The ship was convoyed at this time, and they got off in Le Havre at 9 a.m., where the wounded were being brought by train and ambulances, and as they got off the ship, the wounded were being brought on. They stayed at a hotel and filled out their papers, and then to Paris by rail. Everything that happened in France, they went through Paris. I noticed that. All right, now they're still in Southampton, and on April the 8th, they had to be ready at 10:45 a.m. to the station in army trucks, boarded the train at 10:50 p.m. and arrived in Paris at 11 p.m. at the Regina Hotel. April the 9th, by U.S. Army trucks to the train station, she remarks that the buildings were sandbagged. They boarded a train at 8:15 p.m. that will leave them at 4 a.m. when another train will pick them up at 5:30 for 1 hour, third-class coach, to the hospital. And this is the hospital. On April the 10th, they finally arrived at the hospital, Bourbon-les-Bains. This doctors had a much different trip, and I will try to read that to you. I should. All right, on the night of April the 5th, the officers embarked on an English Channel boat called the Londonderry, an emergency troop ship carrying so many American British officers and British Tommies on their initial trip that all available floor space was utilized for sleeping quarters. The nurses crossed in a hospital ship, the Guildford Castle, while the men in charge of Captain A.B. Miller and Lieutenant Gilmer crossed in an old boat, the Archimedes, carrying horses and mules, sharing their beds with these animals. It was an unpleasant trip, but a safe arrival at Le Havre, April the 6th, with full compensation for the unpleasantness. And it just makes me kind of smile, because the nurses always seemed to go first class, but after coming over on the Canard line, and then to end up sharing your space with horses and animals and mules, it was really a kind of a letdown. Anyway, this is the hospital, and as you can see, you will see this picture. You can tell it's right here, and it's I want to tell you about it. It's a modern hotel recently constructed and equipped with steam heat, electric lights, bathtubs, elevators, good kitchens, and mess halls. Natural hot water from nearby mineral springs dating back to before the conquest of Gaul by Caesar. Now the barracks for the nurses, this is Mother outside her billet. This is the barracks for the nurses. And the sign, Elizabeth had all these pictures enlarged, and it says American Red Cross Club for Nurses, and that's what that sign said, which we didn't know what it said until the picture was, and a lot of the pictures we didn't know what they were but we did know that this was Mother. Isn't she beautiful? And she's so erect. Well, the first days there were organizing the staff, the physicians and nurses, and Mother was to be scrub nurse for Dr. King. This is Dr. King, and this is Mother. And we didn't know that until it was all enlarged. And she is wearing on her head this cap, or whatever you would call it. And this I had given to the Historical Society, and then when Mrs. Highland told me what it was, I asked for it back so that I would have it for this program. But that is that, and that just makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Get a load of the operating room and the furniture. This is Mother in an ambulance, riding in an ambulance, and one of my friends who saw this said, Pat, my uncle was an ambulance driver in World War I, and he proceeded to tell me that they arrived in France in crates, and the men put them together there. And you'll notice that there aren't any headlights, just the empty bowls, a couple little lanterns up here. But that's an ambulance. And I said, oh, I bet it's a Ford. And he said, no, they were Dodges. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, through September, the hospital operated more as a receiving hospital. There were appendectomies and various injuries. The cavalry was stationed there. Doctors, nurses, and corpsmen, along with ambulances, were sent to the front and returned, and the hospital was located 30 miles from the front. There was one time when they expected to be evacuated, but it didn't happen. This is France. This is Paris. They landed up here, Le Havre. Oh, right over here at Le Havre. Here to Paris. And the hospital is in this area, and as you can see, Germany is right here. So there's Nancy, which is very close to where they were. In comparison to our country, that's not a very big country, but I mean, it's more like a state. But anyway, it was big to them. And of course, getting around wasn't that great. On the 18th of April, she says, finally the mail from Madison Avenue arrived. And on the 22nd was her bath day, and they are at a premium. And the 23rd went to a clearing station in squads of 7 for 10 to 14 days. On May the 5th, 1 year ago, Unit L took the Pledge of Allegiance at Allegheny General Hospital. On May the 6th through the 20th, they had many surgery. The 23rd, many were ill from what they called la grippe. And the 27th, they walked out to see an airplane that had fallen about 2 kilometers away. It was a Sped, a small light machine made for speed and chase. And someone made the statement that this war began on horseback As I told you, the cavalry was right there and ended in the air. And I think that's part of our history too. Memorandum for May, she wrote, "Big German offensive, Allied lines are being pushed back. All mail, paper, etc. being held up. We may evacuate very shortly." June the 1st, train service to Paris discontinued. All are being used to transport troops and ammunition. And the 4th through the 6th, more doctors and nurses to the front. On the 10th, she writes, "U-boats over on the coast of U.S. sunk 9 small boats. New York is in darkness." On the 12th, they admitted 21 patients with influenza, epidemic form. And on the 13th, she writes, "Americans were victorious at the Battle of Blaise." On the 27th, many smoky troops sick with pneumonia, and I think she means Negroes. And on the 28th, she saw her first military funeral. On the 5th, military funerals very numerous. Now 6 colored men died, and 4 were transferred to go back to the U.S. On the 6th, this is to be the Negro section from now on. And on the 8th, interesting to watch the colored officers. And I want to insert right now, if any of you are interested at all in our country and the racial problems that we have had, the Hellfighters from Harlem gives you a terrific picture of the men who wanted to go and defend their country, and because they were black, they were segregated. The men from Harlem, Pershing didn't want them. So anyway, they were sent to fight with the French, and they fought very well with the French. They all received the French Croix de Guerre. It just breaks your heart anyway. Everybody should read it. It should be required reading. And I didn't, believe me, I didn't do it until after I read this. Well, she says on the 14th, we go on 12-hour duty for nights for 2 weeks. And she says in her memorandum, "This month has been spent on night duty and it was busy." Well, on August the 1st at 10:15, an alert was called. Lights were dim, but nothing happened. 3 of us went up on the top of the hill to look for Zeps, but saw nothing but stars. On the 8th, hand grenade cases brought in today, beds down the halls. On the 10th, 8 lieutenants now, 5 black, 3 white, very busy on the floor. And on the 12th, the 92nd moved out today. And on the 13th, today we hear an Army Corps is moving in, and Bourbon will be the headquarters. What will happen to us, she says. On the 17th, one of the troops came in, kicked by a mule, jaw fractured. Now I have 5 troop L patients. On the 20th, cavalry to be ready to move to suite. And our mess enlarged to accommodate officers from Army Corps number 6. The 78th Division is on its way in. On the 23rd, she saw the 78th march in over the road from Vitry. And they are from the Arras front. On the 24th, Captain Elkins left today to do lab work for 2 weeks. And on the 26th, much work, many new patients from the 78th Division. The 78th was moving out that day. Well, then her memorandum there was Major General Ballou, colored from all over the states, 92nd Division. Major General McCrae, whites from Camp Dix, New Jersey, in the 78th Division. September. Things are much quieter now at the hospital. We are having a breathing spell. And on the 8th, on duty, on the 6th floor, 5 nurses sent to Base Hospital 20, indefinite duty. The 12th, Marge and I have colds that cannot be matched. And on the 13th, she has in capital letters, flu epidemic. And also a big drive on, Rainbow Division, 110th Infantry, and 10th Squadron of the 2nd Cavalry. 3 doctors sent away, only temporary, very busy, epidemic of influenza throughout the troops. On the 14th, 2 ambulances taken away for 4 days. and the troops coming in very fast. Some of our 3rd Cavalry died. Seems like losing some of the family. On the 16th, boys still flowing in, and gee, but I feel rotten. And on the 17th, she says, still more boys in, and losing more. The epidemic is covering the AEF, and we are losing many. And AEF stands for the American Expeditionary Forces, and I don't think I'm saying that right. And on the 19th, 1 ambulance and 2 boys back, needed 2. Troops still coming in sick. And on the 20th, Captain Bailey's is sick too and in the hospital. Other ambulance home, nothing new, more sick, and a funeral every day. I have never been in an epidemic before, and believe me, this is one. Beds in double rows up the halls, and 3 or 4 dying every day of Spanish influenza. Tonight, the question is, will the captain live until morning? Miss Mansell, Major King, her surgeon, Scott Lease, Kemp, and 5 of the corpsmen are down. On the 25th, more flu. And on the 26th, nothing but more flu. And on the 28th, last night, Captain Bailey's had his crisis, and tonight we think he will get well. Lieutenant Stalker is seriously ill, and I am relieving tonight. Lieutenant Stalker was a dentist. 29th, big gains on the war front. On the 30th, the last day of the month that we think the epidemic is dying down, Captain B is on the road to recovery. Major is up, I'm sorry. Miss Mansell is better, good news. Memorandum for September 1918. I feel that I have learned some very bitter lessons this month. Also some very good ones. After all, we all must live before we realize, no matter what we hear or read. On October the 1st, she writes, things are much quieter. We hope the worst is over. And on April the 3rd, Lieutenant Stalker died this morning. The funeral was this evening, just as sunset. It was beautiful. Our whole personnel marched, and the service was most impressive. All morning, she writes on October 5th, all morning in the OR. The major, that would be Major King, put 2 8-penny American nails in a Frenchman's femur. Quite a national disturbance. Usual afternoon. Big good fire tonight. But they had started to get heat in their billets. But I thought that was especially interesting, especially if anybody is a nurse and they realize that these 8-penny nails were used a long time ago. On the 8th, we were looking for warmer quarters, and Dr. King and 3 others went to help operate on German prisoners, and they returned October the 30th. November the 1st, Turkey signed the armistice. So long war. 1 year ago, the U.S. cavalry arrived. The war is over, and all the town is decorated, the people laughing and such kissing. French treated, and everything was free tonight. And my family, I could just imagine Mother saying, it's such kissing, because that would be. Marge and I made fudge and set the world right again. And on November the 21st, the 29th Division is in town, and headquarters moved to a hotel. November 23rd, emergency appendectomy at 11:30 p.m. And November the 26th, now that the war is over, it seems so long until we will go home. After the war, Mother did a lot of traveling. Not a lot, but she did some traveling. And this is her pass from Paris. As I said, everybody has to go through Paris. Nice, Lyon, and Dijon. And she is to commissioned officers and army nurses will travel first class. Field clerks and non-commissioned will travel second, and all others will travel third. And this was good from December the 5th to December the 21st. And that was her identity card. As you can see, it kind of tore, but it's still readable. I'd like to introduce you to a French family that Mother befriended while she was there. And I do believe that Mr. Pete was a doctor and his wife, and Georgette and Marguerite. That's probably where my sister Peg gets her name. Of course, we have a grandmother that's Margaret also. But they were very friendly, and their friendship lasted way past the war. There are letters to Mother that are just put Mrs. Samuel Jack, Avonmore, USA, and PA over in this corner. No zip, no, but they came through. Can you imagine that today? I cannot. But they were such good friends. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Pete wanted Mother to sleep at her house during the when she was on night duty because it would be quieter. But she did not. All right, and then they have General Jack Pershing reviewed the 3rd Cavalry personnel of Unit L and a third of the 29th Division. And then we have the closing of Unit L, and this is the hospital. We're closing this. And she says the 7th and 6th floor were moved to the 4th floor today. The 5th floor down to the 3rd floor. And on April 20th, the last patient was discharged, and now it's time to close Unit L and head for home. On the 21st, they folded linen all morning, and the 28th, they packed all morning. And on the 29th, our trunks are being marked CN21. Now we know that Unit L is really dead. On May 1st, they thought they would leave for the coast, and here's a holiday in France. It's Labor Day. So there wasn't any transportation to get them to Karnak. So they sat on their trunks, and the next day things got moving. On May the 2nd, they left the hospital, and on May the 4th, through Paris to Karnak on the Britain coast, which is up in here. This is a whole country that's French but isn't French, Brittany. And that's where they were to stay to get the ship home. The time was spent enjoying the coast, and I imagine she really enjoyed that because being from western Pennsylvania, she wouldn't have had much opportunity to be on the coast and finding seashells and taking walks. And then there was one time that she was on May the 9th, she was on KP, and she said it wasn't very exciting. On May the 18th at 5 a.m., down to the dock boarded Prince Frederick Wilhelm, a German ship, only 2 stacks, not at all like the canard they came over on, weighed anchor at 7 p.m., and then they had their last look at France. And guess who was seasick? About the 23rd, she started to feel better, and on May 27th, welcome to New York Harbor. Docked at 7 p.m., there were 3 boats to greet them, bands playing. What a thrill, good old USA. They were quartered at the Hotel Albert, mustered out of the service at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And in her memorandum, she listed Camp Hospital number 21, Bourbon-le-Bain, $5,000 rent yearly for the building, $300 yearly for the water, $260 yearly for the lights, $1,200 for enlisted men monthly, $2,500 for officers, and $1,000 for nurses monthly. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's what war bonds paid for. I don't know. But anyway, was something for thought. So they arrived, and then Mother arrived in Pittsburgh via train, and then home to Buffalo Township. And I'd like to read what Dr. Elkin talks about the doctor's trip to embarkation. On May the 2nd, the nurses left for Brest, and on May the 9th, the remainder of the unit left by special train. The trip to the port of embarkation, Marseille, was one that lasted 4 days. This is they're coming down here. On May the 15th, we boarded the Canada, an old vessel used by French forces in the Mediterranean. It was found necessary for the boat to take on coal, so the big boat put in at Oran, Algeria. The native coalers were on strike, and as a result, 4 days were spent on coaling. After leaving Oran, the boat crossed the Mediterranean, through the Straits of Gibraltar, and past the Azores. The boat was crowded, the food poor, making many sick and depressed. Everyone was delighted to land in New York on June the 2nd, 1919, followed by a trip to Camp Merritt, New Jersey. All from Pittsburgh were sent to Camp Dix, where they were discharged. Meanwhile, the nurses had arrived in New York from Brest on an earlier boat. Some were discharged in New York, a few were detained temporarily in the Army for service or physical disabilities. In 1967, of the 12 medical officers, only 3 were living. Of the 22 nurses, only 11 were still living. Mother was one of the surviving. She died in 1976. I would like to show you Mother's pin. She's a Red Cross nurse, and I'm a Red Cross nurse. And Mother's number is 9432, and my number is 221607. So there was quite a few years between Mother's pin and mine, and I have written to the National Red Cross for any information they might have. I have not heard. I watch for the mail every day. Does anybody have any questions, or anybody want me to explain anything any further? Thank you all for coming, and I've enjoyed doing this.